In our last video, we introduced you to the concept of the Hindu Undivided Family and why it exists. We also listed the many benefits that come with an HUF structure. But today, we explore the flip side, some practical hurdles which may arise with the formation and dissolution of an HUF. Let's take a look at some of these. Number 1. Transfer of property. One of the greatest disadvantages, cloaked as an advantage of the structure, is that all members have a right to the properties and other assets of an HUF. Such joint assets cannot be sold without the consent of all the members of the HUF. This means that every time one buys a property in the name of the HUF, it will belong to every member of the HUF and not just to the person purchasing it. This rule creates several issues when the family grows and expands into multiple branches, which may also lead to disputes among members. As a member owes his or her right to an HUF by birth, he or she cannot bequeath their share to anyone. Also, a member by marriage is only entitled to maintenance and gets no share of the HUF. Any individual born in an HUF automatically becomes a co-partner. Second, if the HUF is the owner of a property, the asset can only be alienated or sold in certain circumstances. This can be either by the consent of all co-partners of the HUF or by the Karta, who is typically the eldest member, to meet a legal necessity or for the benefit of the HUF, in which case consent of all the co-partners is not required. Yet, a co-partner can challenge such a decision. The property can also be alienated or sold by disposing of the assets of the HUF in case of a sole surviving co-partner. If a minor child is involved in the HUF, permission of a court is required to create any third-party rights to any of the assets of an HUF. So when a property is held in the name of an HUF, one has to be mindful of the restrictions on its transfer and on the tax implications arising out of it. Number 3. There's no universal recognition. An HUF is not recognized in any other country as it's a purely Indian concept. Income assessment can therefore become a challenge for members who are moving abroad or obtaining citizenship of other countries. Also, an HUF cannot get private equity funding for a business conducted by it. An HUF may need to be dissolved in case of death of members or in case of a partition between the members. Once an HUF is closed and dissolved, its assets and properties need to be distributed among all its members, which can be challenging. The partition can either be total or partial, and the property can be partitioned through a physical division. A total partition amounts to dissolution of the HUF. The entire joint family property is divided among all co-partners and the family ceases to exist as an HUF. In a partial partition, one co-partner or more and their branch of the family may separate from the others. The remaining co-partners may continue to be an HUF. In such a scenario, the share in the HUF properties of the person leaving the HUF is determined and handed over to him or her. Only co-partners of an HUF are entitled to carry out a partition. Any co-partner can, through a written notice, dissolve the HUF. An HUF owning immovable properties can be dissolved by executing a partition deed or by filing of a partition suit among all the co-partners. If only one or more co-partners of the HUF but not all agree to the partition through a partition deed, it cannot be called dissolution of the HUF, as the deed only extinguishes the co-partners' rights in an HUF by detaching their interest in the joint property, and the remaining continue as an HUF. So how much does an HUF really help? Well, an HUF has both advantages and drawbacks. Benefits from HUF can be multiplied and it can serve as a useful planning tool that can be used to maximize your benefits, keeping in mind the interests of the family. However, it needs to be strategically planned with a long-term perspective. While creating an HUF may be useful for tax planning and investments, one has to be mindful that it entails issues of joint families, it poses legal challenges in dissolution and partitioning of the entity. As the family grows, the dissolution process becomes more tedious and even more complicated. It not only gets emotionally taxing but also legally challenging to dissolve and distribute an HUF's assets. On that note, we're wrapping up the video. Hope this was helpful. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe.